record is fair game, and so are hard-hitting ads just like that one. Let's talk about it with Republican analyst Lenny McAllister in Chicago and Ed Espinoza, a Democratic political consultant, joining us today from Austin, Texas. Nice to see you both. Lenny, I'll start with you here. $3 million. They've spent $1 million so far. That will buy a lot of ads in South Carolina. So is this Newt Gingrich's last stand, do you think?
It has to be Newt Gingrich's last stand. Listen, he's a guy of the South. He's a conservative. He is somebody that's had success within the Republican Party as a leader from the 1990s. If he doesn't remind people of the good things about his campaign and remind folks of the bad things about the Romney nomination possibility, he's going to be out of it by the time he gets through Florida. This is it. He has to have some state that's going to give him the bounce before we go into Super Tuesday, and it's more likely to be South Carolina from a neighboring state of where he's from Georgia, than it is Florida at this point.
You know, these attacks by the GOP, they really sound a lot like the same attacks coming from the Democrats on Mitt Romney. Let's listen to what Mitt Romney said last night.
President Obama wants to put free enterprise on trial. And in the last few days, we've seen some desperate Republicans join forces with him.
So, Ed, let me ask you, I mean, are the Republicans, in a sense, creating a roadmap for the Obama administration to follow here?
Well, what Mitt Romney calls desperate Republicans, everybody else calls 60 to 40% of the Republican electorate. If he's going to win the nomination and consolidate his base, he needs to stop calling them desperate Republicans and recognize they're conservative Republicans and solidify his credentials with them. Now, I want to go back to something that Lenny said about South Carolina, and he's right. This is Newt Gingrich's last stand, not just for political reasons, but South Carolina may be the last place where Newt Gingrich can afford to run a campaign against Mitt Romney. After that, you go into Florida, very extremely expensive state with multiple media markets, and then you go into multiple state primaries, which get really expensive. The only other state left where someone can legitimately compete in terms of affordable media markets is Nevada, which is an important state, but also has one of the highest Mormon populations in the country. It benefits Mitt Romney.
Let me ask you about that, Lenny. I mean, let's talk about religion, because 60% of the South Carolina primary voters are evangelical. So how do you think that Mormonism will play there?
I think that Mormonism would be more of a quote-unquote problem for Mitt Romney if Rick Santorum and Newt Gingrich weren't Catholic. Catholicism is not the biggest religion down in the Southeast. It's the Protestant aspect of Christianity. Therefore, although they can kind of try to have that undercurrent of a message against Mormonism, it's not going to work as much as it might have if it were, for example, Herman Cain that was still in the race. I don't think it's going to be that much of an issue because, like I've said previously, folks that are evangelicals on Sunday still have to go to work on Monday, and as long as Mitt Romney sticks to an economic message, he'll be okay down there in South Carolina.
Ed, what do you think about Ron Paul? I mean, he's certainly, you know, he hit that mark, the 20% point. He's not really seen by everyone anymore as the fringe guy, the fringe candidate. How much damage do you think he can do to Mitt Romney? Because he's probably going to stay in this for a long time.
Yeah, well, what Ron Paul has demonstrated is he's got a steady support of 20% in the Republican primary. What's also being demonstrated here is there are about 30% of hardcore conservatives who are looking for a place to go. That's 50% of your electorate. Now, what's new in this Republican primary process is we have proportional allocation of delegates. If Mitt Romney cannot win a majority of those delegates in convincing fashion, and if he can't do it anytime soon, he runs into problems up against the Republican National Convention. Now, I'm not saying that there's going to be a brokered convention, but what I am saying is there's a possibility that people could second guess where we are with the Romney nomination by the time the convention comes in August.
So, Lenny, just very quickly, if Ron Paul stays in it, will they have to make a deal with him?
They might, but here's the thing. South Carolina is going to be the first place where there's an anti-Ron Paul movement. There's a strong anti-Ron Paul movement in the Carolinas. There's a whole lot of hardcore GOP members that are going to be out in force to make sure that Ron Paul does not have that much of an influence in this race. And you see it in the polls already. Ron Paul, who's been second and third place in the first two states, is in fourth place in South Carolina. Don't expect him to climb much further up than fourth place in the Carolinas.
All right, guys. Lenny McAllister, Ed Espinoza, that is fair game today. Thank you both. And both Newt Gingrich and Rick Santorum had a weak showing in New Hampshire, but they have a plan for South Carolina. We'll talk to their